It was a typical Friday night, and my friend Craig and I were driving back from a weekend getaway. The darkness enveloped the road, stretching out endlessly in front of us, and the only light came from the beams of our headlights slicing through the shadows. We had just left a small town, and exhaustion began to creep into our bones, making every mile feel longer than the last. The rhythmic hum of the tires against the asphalt was almost hypnotic, lulling us into a state of drowsy contemplation as we navigated the winding roads. Our fuel gauge hovered dangerously close to empty, a constant reminder of our precarious situation, so we decided to stop at a dilapidated gas station that appeared in the distance like a ghostly beacon. The flickering neon sign above said open, but the place felt more like a relic of the past than a functioning station. The station was eerily quiet, save for the rustling of the wind and the occasional creak from the old building, which seemed to groan under the weight of its own history. It was the kind of place that made you feel as though time had forgotten it, and I couldn't shake the sense that something was off. As I stepped out of the car, a chill ran down my spine, a premonition that something was amiss in the air. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, a silence that felt heavy and oppressive. Craig followed me inside, and the sight of the cashier, a grumpy man with a scruffy beard and a crooked smile, didn't ease my growing unease. He looked as if he had been stationed there for decades, his eyes dull and lifeless, as if he had seen too much of the world and was now merely a shell of his former self. I approached the counter and asked him for directions back to the highway, my voice slightly shaky. His laughter rang out, harsh and mocking, echoing off the walls of the small store. "You don't have GPS? In this day and age?" He glanced at my phone, which was practically useless in areas devoid of service, and I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. I could almost sense Craig stifling a chuckle behind me, his amusement only adding to my discomfort. The cashier's laughter felt like a judgment, a reminder of my reliance on technology in a place that seemed to reject it entirely. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of a girl standing in the corner of the store, her long dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes fixated on the ground. She looked no older than 16 and was clad in an old, tattered dress that seemed to belong to another time, as if she had stepped out of a different era. Something about her presence tugged at my attention, a feeling of familiarity mixed with an inexplicable sense of dread, but I forced myself to shake it off, unwilling to dwell on the unease creeping into my mind. After receiving vague directions from the cashier, we left the gas station, the door creaking shut behind us like a warning. The night had grown darker, and an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach, a sense that we were leaving something behind. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the sensation that we were being watched, as if unseen eyes were tracking our every move. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I glanced occasionally in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following us, someone who had stepped out of the shadows to pursue us into the night. Suddenly, I spotted the girl from the gas station standing at the edge of the road, her silhouette framed by the glow of our headlights, a haunting figure in the darkness. My heart raced, and instinctively I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the asphalt as panic surged through me. I lost control of the car, the world outside becoming a spinning blur of trees and darkness, the deafening crash as we collided with a massive oak tree echoing in my ears, a sound that would haunt me forever. When I regained consciousness, the air smelled sterile and clean, a stark contrast to the chaos I had just experienced. Blinking heavily, I squinted at my surroundings, realizing I was in a hospital room, the beeping of machines echoing in my ears like a metronome marking the passage of time. Panic surged through me as I reached for my phone, desperate to contact Craig, to ensure he was okay. But my heart sank when I noticed the empty bed beside me. He was nowhere to be found, a chilling realization that sent a wave of dread crashing over me. A police officer entered the room, his expression somber and grave. "Derek?" he asked, and I nodded, my throat dry and my heart racing. "I'm Detective Harris." There's no easy way to say this, but there were no other vehicles involved in the accident. He hesitated before continuing, his words heavy with the weight of their implication. "It seems you hit a tree alone." The dread in my chest expanded, clutching my heart like a vice. "What about my friend? Craig? Where is he?" I demanded, desperation creeping into my voice. Harris shook his head, his eyes filled with pity, a look that made my skin crawl. "I'm sorry, but there's no record of anyone else with you. You were the only one found at the scene." The finality of his words hung in the air, a suffocating reality that settled over me like a shroud. My mind raced, clouds of confusion swirling around me, threatening to engulf me. Hadn't Craig been with me? The memory of the girl flashed before my eyes, her haunting gaze sending shivers down my spine as I recalled the moment I had seen her. It suddenly dawned on me that a girl had been standing at the edge of the road right before the crash, her presence a chilling prelude to the chaos that followed. The detective left, and I was left alone in the sterile room with only my thoughts, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. My phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the oppressive quiet, and I fumbled to check my messages, my heart pounding in my chest. Somehow, amidst the chaos, I had received an email. The subject line read, "I know you saw her." My heart pounded as I opened it, dread pooling in my stomach. The email contained only a few lines, yet it was enough to freeze the blood in my veins. "You saw my son, Derek. The girl you encountered that night is no ordinary human. She is searching for something that was taken from her." The chilling words sent a shudder through me, a sense of foreboding that wrapped around me like a cold embrace. The message was signed with a name I did not recognize, a stranger's name that felt like an accusation. I felt a chill wash over me as I reread the words, each sentence carving deeper into my mind, etching itself into my memory. I had stumbled into something I couldn't understand, something dark and sinister that extended beyond the limits of reality, a world where the rules of the living no longer applied. I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of it all, but the confusion only deepened. I remembered the girl's eyes, the intensity of her stare as though she were pleading for help, and a chill ran through me as I recalled the cashier's mocking laugh. Had he known? Did he understand the depth of the darkness that surrounded us? The hospital room felt stifling, the air around me growing heavy with dread, as if the very walls were closing in. Suddenly, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. I opened my eyes, glancing down the hallway, half expecting to see the girl standing there, but it was empty, a void where her presence should have been. Days turned into nights, and I was released from the hospital, but the haunting memories of that night clung to me like a shadow, a constant reminder of the terror I had faced. I drove back to that gas station, determined to confront the mystery that had consumed my thoughts, the unanswered questions gnawing at me like a persistent itch. As I pulled into the lot, the same eerie stillness enveloped me, a sense of foreboding hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. The gas station was closed, and a sign hung crookedly on the door, "Out of service." I hesitated momentarily before stepping out of my car, the gravel crunching beneath my feet, each step echoing in the silence. The memories flooded back, my encounter with the girl, the mocking cashier, the accident that had changed everything, a series of events that felt intertwined with the very fabric of my being. As I walked towards the entrance, I noticed something glimmering on the ground, a locket. I picked it up, feeling a cold shiver run down my spine as I recognized it. It was the same locket the girl had been wearing, a small piece of her that had somehow found its way into my hands. My pulse quickened as an overwhelming sense of dread engulfed me. What had I stumbled into? What secrets lay buried in the shadows of this place? The air shifted, and I felt an icy breeze against my neck, a whisper echoing through the empty gas station, sending chills racing down my spine. "Help me!" The voice was faint yet clear, a desperate plea that resonated deep within my soul. I turned on my heels, my heart racing out of control. The girl appeared before me, her ghostly figure now clearer, her long hair whipping around her face as if caught in an unseen wind, a vision that both terrified and captivated me. "He took my son," she said, her voice barely more than a breath, a haunting melody that echoed in the stillness. "You have to find him." "Who took him?" I stammered, paralyzed by fear, my mind racing with the implications of her words. "The man in the store, he knows where he is," she continued, her eyes filled with an anguish that pierced my very soul, a pain that was palpable and raw. "You have to confront him." Her plea was urgent, a call to action that resonated within me. As she spoke, the memories of the cashier flooded back, the mocking laughter, the way he had looked at me as though he knew more than he let on. My entire being trembled with fear and resolve. I had to uncover the truth, not just for myself, but for the girl, for her son, who was lost in the shadows of this world. With newfound determination, I rushed back to my car and sped towards the police station, my heart pounding in my chest. The officer from the hospital would have to listen. I needed to expose whatever dark secret lingered in that gas station, whatever sinister reality I had unwittingly become a part of, a web of deceit that threatened to ensnare me. When I confronted Detective Harris, I recounted everything, the girl, the locket, the whisper calling me to find her son. At first, he seemed skeptical, his brows furrowed in confusion, as if trying to piece together a puzzle that was beyond his comprehension. But as I showed him the locket, his expression shifted to one of immediate realization, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. "I may have heard something similar before," Harris finally admitted, his voice low and cautious. "There have been reports of a missing boy in this area, a child who disappeared many years ago. Some say he was last seen near that gas station." The weight of his words settled heavily in the air, a confirmation of my worst fears. The darkness of the situation pressed heavy on my chest, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as the pieces began to fit together. "We have to go back," I exclaimed, urgency lacing my voice. "We have to find her son and confront the man who knows." My determination surged, fueled by the need for answers and the desire to bring justice to the girl who had been trapped in this nightmare. Together, we returned to the gas station, the night cloaked around us like a shroud, a darkness that felt alive and watchful. This time I was determined to find answers. Armed with the knowledge of my encounter, we approached the building, its creaky door inviting us into the heart of the mystery, a gateway to the unknown. But as we opened the door, we found ourselves standing in a scene that defied explanation. The gas station was back in operation, customers milling about, but they were all frozen in time, their faces twisted with despair, expressions of hopelessness etched into their features. It was as if we had stepped into a parallel world, a nightmare that played out in slow motion. And there he was, the cashier, unyielding, standing at the register with a familiar crooked smile, a visage that sent a chill down my spine. "Back for more, I see," he snickered, a glint of something cold and predatory in his eyes, a predator reveling in the fear he inspired. Before I could react, the girl appeared beside me, her expression resolute, a fierce determination shining through her ethereal form. "He holds the truth," she urged, her voice steady. "You must confront him." With newfound courage, I stepped forward, my voice trembling yet unwavering. "Where is the boy? What did you do to him?" I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest as I faced the cashier. The cashier's smile faltered momentarily, and his eyes narrowed, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "You should have left well enough alone," he hissed, his voice dripping with malice, a threat laced within his words. But I refused to back down, my resolve hardening. "Whatever twisted game you're playing, we're not afraid of you. We'll expose you." The weight of my words hung in the air, a declaration of war against the darkness that threatened to consume us. The atmosphere shifted, dark clouds coalescing around us, the customers disappearing into nothingness, leaving only the three of us, me, the girl, and the cashier. The weight of the truth hung heavy in the air, palpable and suffocating. "You want the boy?" he sneered, a sinister laugh escaping his lips, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "He's mine now. Souls lost in these woods become part of me. You should have known better than to come back." His words dripped with arrogance, a belief that he was untouchable, a master of the shadows. The girl wailed in agony, her spirit shimmering as if fading away, a heartbreaking sound that echoed in my ears. "No! You cannot take him anymore. Help me!" Her desperation fueled my determination, igniting a fire within me. In that moment, something clicked within me, a realization that coursed through my veins. I could feel the essence of the girl radiating around me, her pain intertwining with a determination greater than my fears. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the locket, holding it high as I confronted the cashier. "You will not take her son. You will face the consequences of your actions." My voice rang out, strong and unwavering, a challenge to the darkness that had held her captive. At the sight of the locket, the cashier's composure cracked, his facade of confidence shattering. A look of pure fury crossed his face as the winds around us rose violently, swirling in a desperate frenzy, a storm of anger and fear. "You think you can defeat me? You're just a boy, nothing but a passing shadow." He spat, his voice a venomous hiss. But the girl's voice rang in my ears, urging me on, a reminder of the stakes at hand. And in that moment, I felt a surge of energy, a connection created by our shared pain, fueled by her desire for freedom, a bond that transcended the boundaries of life and death. The atmosphere shifted drastically, the wind grew stronger, and the shadows cast by the cashier grew dark and monstrous, twisting and contorting into grotesque forms. I could see the faces of lost souls twisting and contorting around him, trapped in a void of despair, their cries echoing in the silence. I pressed forward, determined, my heart racing with purpose. "We will break this cycle. You will no longer haunt these woods." My words were a rallying cry, a declaration of defiance against the darkness that had plagued this place for too long. With a sudden force, I flung the locket toward him, and in an instant, everything exploded in a blinding light, a brilliance that engulfed us all. The air was filled with loud screams and anguished cries, a cacophony of souls finding their release, their chains of torment shattered in that moment. The cashier staggered back, his twisted smile melting away into an expression of terror, a realization of the power he had underestimated. "No! This cannot be!" he shrieked, his form dissipating as he was consumed by the light, the shadows retreating in the face of the overwhelming brightness. And just like that, the darkness receded, leaving only a profound silence in its wake, a stillness that felt almost sacred. The gas station building faded into the shadows, leaving behind a serene quiet that felt heavy with significance, a moment of peace after the storm. I turned to the girl, who now radiated with a light of her own, her spirit free from the shackles of despair. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing through the emptiness, a sound filled with gratitude. "You freed us." With a final, grateful glance, she turned into a shimmering light and ascended into the night sky, leaving me alone in that vast emptiness, the lingering echo of her presence fading away like a gentle breeze. As I stood in the silence, I understood the weight of what I had witnessed. The darkness could no longer hold its grip, the cycle had been broken, and the souls trapped in limbo found their peace, a release from the torment that had bound them for too long. I took a deep breath and stepped into the light, vowing to keep their memory alive, to share the tale of a girl searching for her son, and the darkness that once haunted the gas station at the edge of the woods. The haunting encounter had come to an end, but the scars of that night would forever remind me of the fragile line between reality and the realm beyond, a reminder that some stories do not end, they simply transform, evolving into legends that echo through the ages. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I was born into this world under the strangest of circumstances, a tale that has been recounted many times, yet it never fails to send a chill down my spine. I had died for 12 agonizing minutes before the doctors managed to revive me, bringing me back from the brink of oblivion. Those 12 minutes, though I was far too young to remember them, have haunted me throughout my life like a ghost that refuses to let go. It's as if that brief encounter with death left a mark on my soul, an imprint of something dark and sinister that has followed me ever since, lurking in the shadows of my existence. As I grew older, I began to notice peculiar things that set me apart from my peers. Shadows seemed to linger longer in the corners of my vision, darting away whenever I tried to focus on them. Whispers echoed in the silence of my room at night, soft and unintelligible, yet filled with a sense of foreboding. I often felt an inexplicable chill that would creep over me, sending shivers down my spine, as if someone or something was watching me from the darkness. I brushed these feelings aside as mere figments of an overactive imagination, a childish fear that would fade with time, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I could sense it, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Every year, as my birthday approached, a sense of dread would settle over me like a heavy fog. Midnight on my birthday became a time of reckoning, a moment when I could feel that dark presence drawing nearer, tightening its grip around my heart. It was as if the universe was reminding me of that fateful day when I first crossed the threshold between life and death. I became determined to confront whatever it was that had been chasing me for so long, to face the entity that seemed to thrive on my fear and uncertainty. To prepare for this annual battle, I took up running. It became a ritual of sorts, a way to channel my anxiety and confront the darkness head-on. Each year, I would gather a group of friends to join me in a midnight run, hoping that the act of running would somehow ward off the looming shadows. The first time we did this, I felt a sense of camaraderie and strength that bolstered my confidence. We laughed and joked as we sprinted through the quiet streets, the moonlight illuminating our path and casting playful shadows behind us. But as the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air grew heavy, thick with an unsettling silence that enveloped us, and I could feel the temperature drop, sending a shiver down my spine. On my 17th birthday, I could feel the darkness more acutely than ever before. I had invited my closest friends, Sarah, Mark, and Jenna, to join me in this ritual. We set out together, our breaths visible in the cool night air, hearts pounding in rhythm with our footsteps. But as we ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that something was lurking just beyond our sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I could sense the tension in the air. As we reached the edge of the woods that bordered our town, I felt an irresistible pull, an urge to venture deeper into the trees. My friends hesitated, exchanging nervous glances that spoke volumes, but I urged them on, desperate to confront the darkness that had haunted me for so long. "It's just a little further," I insisted, my voice steady despite the trepidation swirling within me. "We have to face it together. We can't let it win." We entered the woods, the moonlight filtering through the branches, casting eerie shadows on the ground that danced around us like phantoms. The deeper we went, the more the atmosphere shifted. The laughter faded, replaced by an oppressive silence that wrapped around us like a shroud. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on us, a palpable force that made it difficult to breathe, and I knew we were not alone. An unsettling feeling settled in my stomach, a sense of impending doom that I couldn't shake. Suddenly, Jenna screamed, her voice piercing the heavy silence. I turned just in time to see her being dragged into the shadows by an unseen force. Her terrified expression burned into my memory. Panic erupted among us as we called her name, our voices echoing through the trees in a futile attempt to reach her. But it was too late. The darkness had claimed her, and I felt a surge of terror wash over me, a wave of helplessness that threatened to drown me. I wanted to run back, to save her, but something deep inside me knew that if I stayed, I would be lost too, swallowed by the very darkness I had sought to confront. "Run!" I shouted to Mark and Sarah, my voice trembling with fear. We turned and sprinted back the way we came, the sounds of the forest growing louder and more chaotic behind us. I could hear whispers, taunting and mocking, as if the very trees were alive with malevolence, eager to see us falter. I could feel the darkness clawing at my back, desperate to reclaim what it had lost, and I pushed myself to run faster, fueled by adrenaline and sheer terror. We burst out of the woods and onto the road, gasping for breath, our hearts racing in a frantic rhythm. Mark and Sarah were beside me, their faces pale and haunted, reflecting the horror we had just experienced. "What just happened?" Sarah gasped, her voice shaking with disbelief. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that Jenna was gone, taken by the darkness that had been pursuing me since birth, and the weight of guilt settled heavily on my shoulders. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at me. I had led my friends into danger, and now one of them was missing, lost to the shadows. I became consumed with finding out what happened to Jenna and why the darkness had targeted her. I spent countless hours researching, delving into local legends and stories of hauntings, searching for any clue that might explain our terrifying experience. Every piece of information I uncovered felt like a puzzle piece falling into place, but the picture it formed was one that chilled me to the bone. What I discovered was more horrifying than I could have imagined. There were tales of a malevolent spirit that roamed the woods, a being that fed on fear and despair. It was said to be drawn to those who had brushed with death, and I realized with horror that my birth had marked me as a target. Jenna had been collateral damage in my battle with the darkness, a victim of my own unwillingness to confront the truth. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt a wave of despair wash over me. Determined to confront this entity, I returned to the woods alone on the night of my next birthday, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a heart full of dread. As I stepped into the shadows, the air was thick with tension, and I could feel the darkness coiling around me, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears as I called out for Jenna, hoping against hope that she could hear me. "I'm here! I'm not afraid of you!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the trees, a challenge to the very darkness that sought to consume me. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a tempest, filling my mind with chaos. I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet, and the darkness surged forward, enveloping me in its cold embrace. In that moment, I was transported back to the day of my birth. I saw flashes of memories, bright lights, frantic voices, and the feeling of being pulled away from life, a sensation that felt both familiar and terrifying. I could sense the darkness lurking just beyond, waiting for me to succumb to fear, to give in to despair. But I refused to give in. I fought against the shadows, summoning every ounce of strength I had, every memory of laughter and love that connected me to my friends. "You don't own me!" I screamed, my voice breaking through the cacophony of whispers that sought to drown me. The darkness recoiled, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of light, a glimmer of hope that pushed back against the encroaching shadows. But just as quickly, the shadows surged back, more powerful than before, and I stumbled, feeling the weight of despair pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. I thought of Jenna, of the laughter we had shared, and the bond that had been severed so brutally. In that moment of vulnerability, I felt the darkness reach for me, desperate to pull me into its depths, to claim me as it had claimed her. I closed my eyes, focusing on the love and memories that connected me to my friends, the warmth of their presence flooding my mind. I envisioned Jenna, her smile bright and infectious, and I felt a warmth envelop me, a shield against the encroaching darkness. "You are not alone," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the whispers, and suddenly the darkness began to recede, retreating from the light that I had summoned within. With a final surge of determination, I pushed back against the shadows, breaking free from their grasp. The whispers faded, replaced by the sound of my own heartbeat, a reminder that I was still alive, still fighting. I opened my eyes to find the woods bathed in moonlight, the darkness retreating into the corners of the night, defeated for now. I stumbled back home, my heart racing with adrenaline and fear, the weight of what I had just faced settling heavily on my chest. I had faced the darkness and lived to tell the tale, but the cost was heavy. Jenna was still gone, and I knew that the battle was far from over. The darkness would always be a part of me, a reminder of the fragile line between life and death that I had danced upon since the moment I was born. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only scratched the surface of the truth. The darkness would return, and I would have to confront it again, perhaps even more fiercely than before. But for now, I had survived, and I was determined to uncover the secrets of my birth and the entity that haunted me, to find a way to break the cycle of fear that had ensnared me for so long. In the days that followed, I began to piece together a plan, a strategy to confront the darkness once and for all. I would gather my remaining friends, share my experiences, and together we would delve deeper into the mystery that surrounded my birth and the shadows that followed me. I needed to understand the connection between my birth and the darkness that pursued me relentlessly. I needed to find Jenna, to honor her memory and ensure that her sacrifice was not in vain. But as I prepared for the next step in my journey, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. I could feel its presence lurking just beyond my perception, a reminder that it was always there, biding its time. And deep down, I knew that the next encounter would be even more terrifying than the last, a test of my resolve and my will to survive. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. From a young age, I discovered that I possessed a peculiar ability. I could freeze time. It was a gift or a curse, depending on how you looked at it. At first, it felt like a superpower, a way to escape the mundane realities of life. I could pause the world around me, allowing me to explore my surroundings without the constraints of time. The thrill of it was intoxicating, and I felt like I had been handed the keys to a magical realm where I could move freely while everything else stood still. However, as I grew older, I learned that this ability came with a myriad of limitations and terrifying consequences that I had not anticipated. Whenever I activated my power, everything around me would come to a standstill. The bustling streets filled with people, the rustling leaves dancing in the wind, even the ticking clock on the wall would freeze in place, suspended in an eerie silence that felt both liberating and unnerving. I could move freely within this frozen realm, slipping through moments like a ghost, observing the world without being a part of it. However, there was one crucial restriction that weighed heavily on me. I could not move or manipulate any objects or people. They remained locked in their positions, unaware of my presence, trapped in their own frozen moments while I drifted through their lives. Initially, I reveled in my unique ability. I used it to sneak into places I shouldn't be, to observe people without them knowing, and to indulge in my curiosity about the world around me. I felt invincible, like a secret agent in a world where time was my ally. But the thrill soon faded, replaced by a growing sense of dread that crept into my heart. The more I used my power, the more I felt an unsettling presence lurking just beyond my perception. It was as if I was being watched, followed by something sinister that thrived on my fear and anxiety. One fateful evening, I found myself at a local cafe, indulging in my favorite pastime of people watching. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, filled with laughter and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. I activated my ability, freezing the scene around me, and as I wandered through the stillness, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow flitting between the tables. It was darker than the surrounding darkness, a shape that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. My heart raced as I turned to face it, but it vanished before I could fully comprehend what I had seen, leaving me shaken and unsettled. Returning to my seat, I tried to shake off the encounter, but it haunted me like a ghost. I began to notice strange occurrences in my life that I could not explain. My fiancé, Mark, started experiencing unexplainable events that filled our home with an unsettling atmosphere. He would wake up in the middle of the night, claiming he felt someone watching him, his eyes wide with fear. He found objects moved from their places, little things that seemed innocuous at first, but they added up to something more sinister. Once, he even mentioned hearing whispers in the dark, soft and haunting, as if someone were trying to communicate with him. I brushed it off as stress from work, but deep down, I feared that my ability had awakened something dark and malevolent that was now intruding upon our lives. As the days passed, the shadow returned, more frequently and more boldly than before. I could feel its presence even when I wasn't using my power, lurking in the corners of my mind and the edges of my reality. It seemed to thrive on my fear, feeding off the energy that radiated from my increasingly anxious mind. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that it was just a figment of my imagination, but the more I denied it, the more real it became, as if it were growing stronger with each passing day. One night, I decided I could no longer live in fear. I had to confront the shadow that had invaded my life. I froze time again, determined to face whatever it was that had been haunting me for so long. As I moved through the stillness, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. The air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped dramatically. I could see my breath in front of me, a misty cloud in the otherwise frozen world, and it only added to the eerie atmosphere that surrounded me. Suddenly, I saw it, the shadow looming in the corner of the cafe, its form shifting and writhing like smoke, a dark entity that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I felt an inexplicable pull toward it, an urge to understand what it was and why it had latched onto me. As I approached, the shadow seemed to solidify, taking on a more defined shape. It was a figure, indistinct yet familiar, and I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized I was no longer just an observer. I was in the presence of something otherworldly. I reached out, but the moment my fingers brushed against the shadow, everything changed. The world around me shattered like glass, and I was thrown into a void, a place where time had no meaning and reality twisted into something unrecognizable. I could hear whispers echoing in the darkness, words I couldn't comprehend but felt deep within my soul, resonating with my deepest fears. Panic surged within me as I realized I was trapped in a realm that defied logic and reason. When I finally regained my senses, I was back in the cafe, but everything felt different, altered in a way that I couldn't quite grasp. The shadow was gone, but its essence lingered in the air, a reminder of the encounter that left me shaken. I rushed home, my heart pounding in my chest, desperate to find solace in Mark's presence. But when I arrived, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Mark was sitting on the couch, his face pale and drawn, as if he had just witnessed something horrific. "I had the strangest dream," he said, his voice trembling as he struggled to explain. "I saw you, but you were different. You were surrounded by darkness, and there was something behind you, something that felt menacing." A chill ran down my spine at his words. I knew then that the shadow was not just a figment of my imagination. It was a manifestation of something far more sinister, something that had latched onto us both. I had unwittingly opened a door to a realm beyond my comprehension, and now it was reaching out to claim what was its. As the days turned into weeks, our lives spiraled into chaos. Mark's nightmares grew worse, more vivid and terrifying, and I could feel the shadow's influence creeping deeper into our reality. It whispered to me in the dead of night, taunting me with secrets I couldn't grasp, filling my mind with doubt and fear. I became a prisoner of my own ability, trapped in a cycle of fear and dread that threatened to consume me whole. Desperate for answers, I sought out anyone who might understand what I was experiencing. I stumbled upon an old woman in a dusty bookstore, her eyes filled with a knowing light that seemed to pierce through my soul. "You've opened a door," she said, her voice a raspy whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "You must close it before it consumes you both." Her words echoed in my mind as I returned home, determination coursing through me like a wildfire. I had to find a way to confront the shadow and reclaim my life before it was too late. I began to research ancient texts, seeking knowledge about the dark forces that lurked beyond the veil of time. Each night, I would freeze time, searching for the shadow, but it eluded me, always just out of reach, as if it were playing a game with my sanity. The lines between reality and my ability began to blur, and I felt myself spiraling into a dark abyss of despair. One night, as I stood in the frozen cafe, I felt a surge of anger bubbling within me. I was tired of being afraid, tired of living in the shadow of something that sought to control me. I called out to the shadow, demanding it show itself, my voice echoing defiantly in the stillness. To my surprise, it responded, coalescing before me in a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to draw on the light around it. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I faced it, ready to confront the fear that had haunted me for so long. "You have no power over me," I shouted, my voice echoing in the silence that surrounded us. "I will not be your prisoner." The shadow paused, as if considering my words. For a moment, I felt a connection, a strange understanding between us that sent chills down my spine. But then, it lunged at me, a rush of cold air that threatened to envelop me completely. I fought back, drawing on every ounce of strength I had left. In that moment, I realized that the shadow was not just an external force, it was a part of me, a reflection of my fears and doubts that I had long tried to suppress. With newfound clarity, I reached out, not to fight, but to embrace the darkness that had plagued me. I accepted it as a part of my existence, acknowledging the fears I had tried to ignore for so long. The shadow hesitated, and slowly, it began to dissolve, merging with the air around me. I felt a weight lift from my chest, the oppressive presence fading into nothingness, leaving me feeling lighter and more liberated than I had in ages. When I returned to the real world, I found myself back in the cafe, the familiar sounds of life returning as if nothing had happened. I rushed home, eager to share my experience with Mark, hoping that he too had been freed from the shadow's grip. But as I entered our apartment, I was met with an eerie silence that sent a shiver down my spine. The air felt heavy, and a sense of dread washed over me like a cold wave. I called out for Mark, but there was no response. Panic surged through me as I searched the apartment, my heart racing with each passing second. Finally, I found him in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, his face pale and expressionless, as if he had just witnessed something horrific. "Mark?" I whispered, my voice trembling with fear. "Are you okay?" He turned to me, his eyes vacant and lifeless. "It's too late," he said, his voice hollow and filled with despair. "I can feel it, the shadow." In that moment, I realized the painful truth. The shadow had not been vanquished, it had merely shifted its focus. It had taken root in Mark, feeding off his fears and doubts, just as it had with me. I felt a wave of despair wash over me as I understood the depth of my mistake and the consequences of my actions. Desperate to save him, I reached out, taking his hands in mine, hoping to channel the light I had found within myself. "We can fight this together," I urged, my heart heavy with determination. "We have to confront it, just like I did." But the darkness had already begun to seep into him, twisting his thoughts and emotions into something unrecognizable. I watched helplessly as the light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by an emptiness that sent chills down my spine. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't reach him, and the feeling of helplessness was suffocating. As the days turned into nights, I felt myself slipping deeper into despair. The shadow loomed over us, a constant presence that threatened to consume everything we held dear. I could no longer freeze time. The fear had paralyzed me, rendering me powerless. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, and I didn't know how to escape from the darkness that surrounded us. One night, as I lay in bed, I felt a familiar chill in the air, the unmistakable presence of the shadow returning, more powerful than ever. I could sense it creeping into my mind, whispering doubts and fears that threatened to overwhelm me. I fought back, trying to remain strong for Mark, but the darkness was relentless in its pursuit. It felt like a battle I was destined to lose, and the weight of despair threatened to crush me. In a moment of desperation, I turned to the old woman's words, recalling her warning about the door I had opened. I needed to close it, to sever the connection between the shadow and our lives before it was too late. I began to gather the items I had collected during my research, creating a makeshift ritual to banish the darkness once and for all. Each item held significance, a piece of the puzzle that would help me reclaim our lives. As I prepared, I felt Mark's presence behind me, his voice laced with confusion. "What are you doing?" he asked, his eyes reflecting the turmoil within him. "I'm trying to save us," I replied, my heart heavy with the weight of my intentions. "We have to confront the shadow together." But as I spoke, I saw the flicker of something dark in his eyes, a reflection of the shadow that had taken hold of him. The realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. The shadow had twisted him, warping his thoughts and emotions into something malevolent. With trembling hands, I began the ritual, calling out to the shadow, demanding it reveal itself. The air grew thick with tension, and I felt the darkness closing in around us, suffocating me with its weight. I could hear whispers, taunting me, echoing my deepest fears and insecurities, filling my mind with doubt. "Leave us alone!" I shouted, my voice breaking under the strain. "You have no power here." The shadow materialized before us, a swirling mass of darkness that threatened to engulf everything in its path, a dark void that seemed to pulse with malevolence. I could feel its cold grip tightening around my heart, squeezing the hope from my chest and replacing it with despair. But I refused to back down. I reached for Mark, pulling him closer to me, desperate to remind him of the light that still flickered within him. "We can do this together," I urged, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "You're stronger than this." As I spoke, I felt a flicker of light within him, a spark of the man I loved, a reminder of the connection we shared. I focused on that light, channeling my energy into it, willing it to grow and push back against the encroaching darkness. The shadow hesitated, as if sensing the shift in our connection, the bond that had once been unbreakable. "Together!" I cried, my voice rising above the whispers that threatened to drown us. "We can fight it!" In that moment, I felt the darkness begin to recede, the grip loosening around us as if it were being forced back by the light we had ignited. The shadow writhed in anger, but we stood our ground, united against the encroaching darkness. I could see the light in Mark's eyes beginning to shine again, pushing back against the shadow's influence, illuminating the room with a warmth that felt like home. With one final surge of determination, I called out to the shadow, demanding it release its hold on us. The darkness screamed, a cacophony of rage and despair that echoed in the depths of my mind, but we held firm, refusing to succumb to its power. Slowly, it began to dissolve, retreating into the shadows from which it had come, leaving behind a sense of calm that washed over us like a gentle tide. As the last remnants of darkness faded away, I collapsed into Mark's arms, tears streaming down my face, a mixture of relief and joy flooding my heart. We had faced the shadow together, and in doing so, we had reclaimed our lives from the brink of despair. The fear that had once consumed us was replaced by a sense of peace, a newfound understanding of the power we held within ourselves and the strength of our bond. In the days that followed, we began to rebuild our lives, learning to navigate the complexities of my ability and the darkness that had once threatened to tear us apart. I learned to embrace my power, to use it wisely and thoughtfully, while Mark found strength in his own resilience. We became partners in this journey, supporting each other as we faced the challenges that lay ahead. The shadow may have been vanquished, but its lessons lingered in our hearts, a reminder of the darkness that exists within us all. We understood that it is our choices that define who we become, and that even in the face of fear, there is always a light that can guide us back to safety. Together, we forged a new path, one illuminated by the light of hope and love that we had fought so hard to reclaim. And as I looked to the future, I knew that no shadow could ever extinguish that light again, for we had faced the darkness and emerged stronger than ever before. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It was supposed to be just another night shift at the old gas station on the edge of town. I had done this countless times before, but from the moment I arrived, a sense of dread washed over me like a cold wave crashing against the shore. The flickering neon sign barely illuminated the cracked asphalt of the parking lot, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to dance in the darkness. Inside, the faint hum of the fluorescent lights only added to the unsettling atmosphere that enveloped the place like a thick fog. My colleague, Carlos, greeted me with a weary nod, his face etched with lines of fatigue and concern that hinted at a long night ahead. "Did you notice anything weird?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if the very air around us might be listening. I shrugged, trying to shake off the chill creeping up my spine. The only unusual thing I had noticed was the way the shadows twisted and contorted under the pale light, as if something unseen was lurking just beyond reach, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. It was the kind of feeling that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and I couldn't shake it off. As the night wore on, the gas station stood silent, save for the occasional sound of rustling leaves outside, whispering secrets that seemed to echo through the stillness. I busied myself with the usual chores, checking the pumps and restocking snacks, but an unsettling feeling lingered in the air, a sense of foreboding that something was about to happen, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't until later that the real strangeness began to unfold. Around midnight, a figure emerged at the edge of the parking lot, cloaked in a long, dark trench coat that billowed slightly in the wind, as if it had a life of its own. His face was obscured, deep in the shadows cast by a wide-brimmed hat that seemed to swallow the light. Carlos and I exchanged worried glances, and he instinctively reached for the baseball bat we kept under the counter for emergencies, the grip tightening in his hands. "Who is that?" he murmured, his eyes narrowing as he squinted into the darkness. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the growing sense of unease. "I don't know. Maybe just another drifter looking for a place to rest?" As the figure drew closer, I could see it wasn't just any drifter. His eyes seemed to glimmer with an unnatural light, a predatory gleam that sent a shock of fear coursing through me. A faint smile crept across his lips, unsettling and sinister, as he approached the entrance with a deliberate pace, his footsteps sounding heavier than they should against the asphalt. "What do you want?" Carlos called out, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, betraying his fear. The man stopped just short of the door, his smile widening into something almost mocking. "I'm here to ask for a favor, and to show you something interesting," he replied, his tone smooth and velvety, like honey laced with poison. Against my better judgment, curiosity got the better of me. "What kind of favor?" I asked, my heart racing as I stepped closer, drawn in despite the warning bells ringing in my mind. "Just a small task," he replied, his voice dripping with allure. "Follow me." Before we could respond, he turned abruptly and walked towards the overgrown lawn adjacent to the gas station, revealing a line of peculiar lawn gnomes tucked among the tall grass. Each gnome was painted in garish colors, their eyes seemingly glinting in the darkness, fixed on us like sentinels guarding a hidden realm. Carlos chuckled nervously, attempting to lighten the mood. "What is this? A Halloween decoration? It's not even October yet." But the longer I looked at them, the more unsettling they became. Each gnome had a strange expression. Some seemed amused while others wore grimaces, as if they were witnesses to something gruesome unfolding just beyond our sight. The trenchcoat man gestured toward them with an almost reverent gesture, his eyes gleaming with excitement and something darker. "They're not just decorations," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They hold secrets, dark secrets that this land has buried deep." I felt a shiver run down my spine as the atmosphere thickened with an unnameable dread. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. "The gnomes are the guardians of this land," he said cryptically, his voice low and serious. "They witness the deeds of those who visit. And there are some who would do anything to prevent their secrets from being unveiled." He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if someone might overhear. "You see, there was an accident here a while back. A local man named Spencer lost his life, but the truth is buried beneath whispers and lies, hidden from those who dare to seek it." As he spoke, a flicker of memory jolted me. Spencer, a name that echoed among the townsfolk, a ghost of a man whose story had become a cautionary tale. They said he was involved with a strange cult that met in the woods, performing twisted rituals under the moonlight, drawing power from the darkness. I exchanged a glance with Carlos, a mix of fear and curiosity dancing in our eyes, the weight of the night pressing down on us. "What does this have to do with us?" I asked, feeling the intensity of his gaze pressing into me. "The cult still operates," he said, his voice dropping lower, almost conspiratorial. "They're always on the lookout, and they won't hesitate to silence anyone who comes too close to the truth. You two are in more danger than you realize." Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A low murmur broke the stillness, followed by shadows stirring in the darkness. I turned to see figures emerging from the woods, their faces obscured by hoods, the glowing embers of their eyes illuminating the night like malevolent stars. There were at least a dozen of them, moving with an unsettling grace, encircling us like wolves ready to pounce on unsuspecting prey. "They've come for you," the trenchcoat man said calmly, as if he were merely an observer in this unfolding nightmare, watching us from the sidelines. I felt the panic rise in my chest as I grabbed Carlos's arm, my heart racing. "We need to go. Now." But as we turned to flee, the cloaked figures advanced, slicing off our escape route. I could feel their presence, alive and pulsating with malevolence, a dark energy that seemed to wrap around us. The man in the trench coat smirked, revealing rows of sharp teeth that glinted in the dim light. Now, he taunted, his voice dripping with amusement, "there's no need to rush. We can offer so much more, if you're willing to listen." He beckoned for us to approach the gnomes, their painted faces watching us with a disturbing intensity. "Join us, and you'll uncover the truth about Spencer, or join the others who've disappeared into the night, lost to the shadows." Carlos hesitated, his eyes darting between the figures and the gnomes, uncertainty etched across his face. "What does that even mean?" he whispered, fear creeping into his voice. The trenchcoat man stepped closer, whispering, "Are you willing to sacrifice everything to discover the secrets of your own humanity? The price may be higher than you think." I felt a surge of anger at the absurdity of the situation. "No! We're not afraid of you!" I shouted defiantly, though my voice trembled slightly. The murmurs grew louder, and the shadows closed in, revealing grotesque faces within the hoods, their mouths twisted into sinister grins. "You don't know fear yet," one of them hissed, stepping closer, its voice a chilling rasp that sent shivers down my spine. In that moment, time froze. I seized Carlos's hand and pulled him toward the gas station. Run! We burst through the door, slamming it shut and locking it behind us with trembling hands. Our breaths were ragged, the adrenaline surging through my veins as we reached for the bat, the only semblance of safety we had. Carlos was pale, trembling, the reality of our situation dawning on him. What the heck just happened? He gasped, his voice shaky with disbelief. I don't know, but we need to call the police, I said, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. As I fumbled for the phone, a low thud echoed from outside, followed by a haunting chant that reverberated through the darkness, sending chills down my spine. They're coming, Carlos said, eyes wide with fear, his voice barely above a whisper. We should have left when we had the chance. My mind raced. What did I know about Spencer? The rumors? The cult? As flashes of news reports about local disappearances filled my mind, I realized I had brushed them off as mere folklore, stories meant to scare children. But it was all too real, and now I was caught in its web, ensnared by the darkness that surrounded us. We need to stay focused, I urged him, trying to keep my voice calm. We have to defend ourselves. We can't let them in. But chaos erupted as the door rattled violently, the figures outside demanding to be let in, their chants growing louder, a rhythmic beat that resonated deep within my core, echoing the frantic beat of my heart. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls and making the gnomes seem alive with malevolent intent, their painted faces contorting into expressions of glee. Then, just as abruptly, the thudding stopped, plunging us into an unsettling silence. Do you hear that? I whispered, straining to listen, my heart pounding in my chest. Silence enveloped us, thick and suffocating, pressing down on us like a weight. Just as I thought we were granted a moment of reprieve, the trench coat man appeared in the window, his smile wider than ever, a grotesque mockery of joy. You can't hide forever. The truth will find you, no matter how far you run. In a surge of adrenaline, I charged to the window and slammed the blind shut, desperation clawing at my throat. What do they want from us? I shouted, my voice rising in panic, desperate for answers. They want to keep the truth buried, he yelled back, his voice laced with a chilling amusement that sent shivers down my spine. To keep their secrets safe. And you too, you have a choice. I turned to Carlos, feeling desperation claw at my throat, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. What choice? I asked, my voice trembling. Should we confront these creatures or run blindly into the night? We had stumbled into a nightmare, and it felt as if there was no escape from the darkness that surrounded us. The sound of fists pounding against the door jolted us from our thoughts, the relentless thudding echoing the frantic beat of my heart. How long could we last in here? The gnomes outside seemed to whisper, their painted faces watching us with malevolent joy, as if they were part of this twisted game. Let's make a run for it, I decided, adrenaline propelling my limbs as I moved toward the back door, my instincts screaming at me to escape. If we can make it to my car, we can put some distance between us and them. Carlos nodded, his face set in determination, the fear in his eyes giving way to resolve. On 3. We counted down, and with one final glance at the door, I flung open the back exit and sprinted into the darkness, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. The imminent danger loomed large as we dashed toward my car parked under a flickering streetlight, the only beacon of hope in this nightmare. As I fumbled for my keys, the shadows emerged behind us, a cacophony of chants growing louder, wrapping around us like a shroud. Get in! I yelled, urging Carlos to hurry, my heart racing as the night felt alive with malignant energy, only heightened by the whispers that seemed to poke and prod at our fraying sanity. We jumped into the car, slamming the doors shut, and I cranked the engine, praying it would start. As the headlights flickered to life, a chilling sight greeted us. The gnomes had lined up along the perimeter of the gas station, their eyes glowing ominously in the darkness, watching us, judging us, as if they were the arbiters of our fate. And then I saw him, Spencer. I gasped, my heart racing, and slammed my foot on the gas pedal, desperate to escape the horror that had unfolded. "Drive!" Carlos shouted, his voice barely breaking through my shock, a sense of urgency fueling his words. We sped down the desolate road, my heart racing as the gas station faded into the distance, the oppressive weight of dread lifting slightly. Reality felt distorted. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the trenchcoat man or the chanting figures pursuing us, their dark forms looming in the shadows. What the hell just happened? Carlos breathed, his demeanor shifting from fear to incredulity, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Was that really Spencer? "I don't know," I replied, my voice firm yet trembling, the uncertainty gnawing at my insides. "But I have a feeling we're not done with them. They'll find us again. They always find those who uncover their secrets, and we've just scratched the surface." As we drove into the night, a sense of unease settled heavily in my chest, a lingering dread that refused to dissipate. The world felt twisted, every shadow laced with the remnants of what we had experienced, the whispers of the knowns echoing in my mind. And as we raced away from the gas station, I knew one thing: the line between reality and nightmares had blurred, and there was no turning back. The truths we uncovered would haunt us forever, echoing in the dark corners of our minds, whispered by the gnomes that had borne witness to our descent into darkness, waiting for the moment when we would be drawn back into their sinister embrace. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. As an experienced rescue diver, my life has always been intricately connected to water, particularly the vast and deep waters of the Great Lakes. These lakes, with their shimmering surfaces reflecting the sunlight, hide countless secrets beneath, secrets that have intrigued and captivated many. The underwater world is a realm filled with mystery and the unknown, and we are the brave souls who venture into these depths, seeking to uncover the enigmas that lie beneath. My partner, Michael, is not just a fellow diver. He is a legend in the diving community, known for his expertise and extensive knowledge of the underwater environment. He has always been my confidant, someone I trust implicitly. Michael constantly emphasizes the crucial importance of diving safety and the necessity of adhering to the established rules. He has taken the time to teach me how to survive and work effectively in complex underwater environments, how to remain calm in the face of emergencies, and how to handle unexpected situations. His wealth of experience has opened my eyes to the fact that diving is not merely a skill, it is an art form that requires finesse, intuition, and respect for the ocean's power. One sunny morning, with the sky clear and the sun shining brightly, we decided it was the perfect day to dive into Lake Superior, a place known for its legendary burial site of missing persons. Stories about this eerie location have circulated within the diving community for years, sending chills down the spines of many who have heard them. According to local lore, the lake bed is said to hide the remains of numerous missing individuals, their souls endlessly wandering in the water, waiting for someone brave enough to find them. While I was somewhat skeptical about these supernatural tales, Michael held a firm belief in them. He often said that the lake has a will of its own and possesses the ability to sense the hearts and intentions of divers who enter its depths. As we prepared our diving gear, I noticed the serious expression on Michael's face. He handed me an old amulet, explaining that it was a keepsake from his mother, and he hoped it would bring me good fortune during our dive. I hesitated for a moment, feeling a mix of unease and curiosity, but eventually hung it around my neck. Soon after, we took a deep breath and jumped into the lake, instantly feeling the cold, oppressive water envelop us like a heavy blanket. As we descended deeper into the lake, the light around us gradually faded, and the underwater world transformed into something increasingly strange and surreal. We swam through a dark area filled with tangled weeds and bizarre underwater creatures, each more peculiar than the last. In this silent world, the only sound I could hear was my heartbeat, which echoed in my ears, amplifying the inexplicable tension I felt in my chest. When we entered a narrow underwater cave, I sensed we were on the brink of discovering something truly unique. The cave walls were covered in thick, colorful algae, vibrant yet foreboding, hinting at some underlying danger. Michael led the way, his movements confident and steady, while I followed closely behind, trying to keep pace. Suddenly, I felt a chilling shiver run down my spine, as if an unseen presence was watching our every move, lurking just out of sight. Out of nowhere, Michael's flashlight flickered ominously, its beam illuminating a shadowy figure silently floating in the water ahead of us. My heart sank as a flood of terrifying thoughts rushed through my mind, each more horrifying than the last. But to my astonishment, Michael swam toward the creature without a moment's hesitation, his curiosity seemingly overpowering his caution. I tried to keep up with him, but an invisible force seemed to pull me back, preventing me from moving forward. Then, in an instant, the shadow moved, darting away at a speed much faster than we could swim. Its shape twisted and turned, gliding through the water with an agility that left me breathless. Michael let out a blood-curdling scream as the creature grabbed him tightly, and my heart nearly stopped as I watched him being dragged into the dark abyss. I struggled desperately to chase after him, my instincts screaming at me to save him, but I found I couldn't move, as if an irresistible force had me pinned in place, immobilized by fear and disbelief. In that harrowing moment, memories of diving with Michael flooded my mind, his teachings, the countless diving safety tips he had shared, and his profound love for the underwater world. A profound fear of loss washed over me, deeper and more consuming than any shadow lurking in the depths. I fought with all my might to break free from this mental and emotional constraint, and after a surge of determination, I finally shook off my paralyzing fear and began to swim upward, desperate to reach the surface. As I broke through the surface of the water, I gasped for fresh air, my heartbeat thundering in my ears like a war drum. My trembling hands fumbled with my diving gear, trying to contact the dive base, but all I heard in my earpiece was static, a maddening reminder of my isolation. A wave of unprecedented loneliness and despair washed over me, threatening to drown me in its depths. Michael's dire situation made it impossible for me to calm my racing thoughts, but I knew I couldn't underestimate the abyss. I couldn't risk diving again out of fear for my own safety. I floated on the surface for what felt like an eternity, trying to clear my thoughts and make sense of what had just happened. But the haunting image of the shadow and Michael's capture lingered in my mind, refusing to fade away. Eventually, I made the difficult decision to return to shore and gather a team to help organize a rescue operation. I knew that facing the abyss could render our efforts futile, yet I felt compelled to try. A few hours later, our rescue team finally assembled and set out, ready to confront the unknown. When I returned to the dive site, it was already evening, and the lake shimmered with golden waves in the fading light of the sunset, everything looking deceptively calm and peaceful. Yet, my unease resurfaced, a sense of foreboding creeping back into my mind. The rescue team members began preparing at the lake's edge, and this time, I felt a renewed sense of determination coursing through me. The underwater world remained silent, but everything seemed to warn us of the dangers that lay ahead. Eventually, we reached that perilous cave, but to my dismay, Michael was still missing. My panic grew with each passing moment, as if some dark force from the seabed was drawing me in, beckoning me to join Michael in the depths. We searched frantically around the cave, but every shadow felt like a silent mockery, the painful reality of our situation echoing in my heart, amplifying my fear. Just when we were about to give up hope, I felt that shiver again, more intense than before. A familiar figure appeared in my mind, as if Michael was still by my side, encouraging me to keep going and not to give up. With that incredible feeling of connection, I closed my eyes and dove deeper into the darkness, searching for any trace he might have left behind, any sign that he was still alive. At the moment I was about to surrender to despair, my hand brushed against a cold object, and my heart raced with a mix of hope and dread. It was Michael's glove, and the surrounding water surged around me, almost as if it echoed his cries for help. My heart raced, and I sensed something ominous lurking in the depths. Was it him? I quickly reached for the glove, but an unseen force pulled me into the depths of the cave, dragging me down into the darkness. In that dark moment, I suddenly realized that the lake's secrets were far more complex and intertwined than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just about the underwater objects and the bodies of the missing. It was also about the presence of that shadow lurking in the depths, a malevolent force that fed on our fears. Just like the currents at the lakebed, we had no idea what price we were paying for our adventure, what sacrifices we were making in our quest for answers. The silence of history and the secrets of the past intertwined at that moment, waiting to swallow us whole, to claim us as part of its dark narrative. Yet, a glimmer of hope remained in my heart, a flicker of light amid the encroaching darkness, as Michael's teachings flowed through my soul with every moment I spent diving. I knew that no matter how dark it got, the instinct to survive was unshakable, a primal force that would not be easily extinguished. So, I swam with all my might toward the surface, carrying an unfinished mission, determined to find Michael, and heading toward the light that promised safety and salvation. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I never imagined that a simple hiking trip could spiral into a living nightmare. It was supposed to be an exhilarating adventure, a much-needed break from the mundane routine of our everyday lives. My friends and I, a tight-knit group of 5, set out one bright Saturday morning, our spirits high and our backpacks brimming with supplies. We were eager to explore the rumored hidden cave deep in the woods, a place that promised mystery, excitement, and perhaps a touch of danger. Little did we know that the darkness we would encounter would be far more profound and terrifying than just the absence of light. As we trekked deeper into the forest, the trees grew denser, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers grasping at the sky. The air became cooler, and an unsettling silence enveloped us, wrapping around us like a thick fog. It felt as though the forest itself was holding its breath, warning us to turn back before it was too late. But we pressed on, driven by an insatiable curiosity and the thrill of discovery that spurred us forward. After hours of hiking, we finally stumbled upon the entrance to the cave, a gaping maw in the earth that seemed to beckon us forward with a sinister allure. With flashlights in hand, we ventured inside, our hearts pounding with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The darkness swallowed us whole, and the air grew damp and heavy, clinging to our skin like a shroud. The walls were slick with moisture, and the sound of dripping water echoed around us, creating an eerie symphony that heightened our unease. We laughed nervously, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that crept into our minds. After all, it was just a cave, a natural formation, nothing more. But as we delved deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels, the laughter faded, replaced by an oppressive silence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. We wandered through the winding passages, our lights dancing on the walls, revealing strange markings and symbols that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The sight was mesmerizing yet unsettling, and I felt a chill run down my spine as I traced one of the symbols with my finger, its surface cold and rough beneath my touch. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the cave, and the ground trembled beneath our feet. Panic set in as we realized we were not alone in this dark, foreboding place. From the shadows, they emerged, spiders, large and grotesque, their bodies glistening in the pale light of our flashlights. They moved with an eerie grace, their multiple legs skittering across the stone floor as if they were dancing to a macabre tune. I froze, my heart racing as I watched them approach, their many eyes glinting with a predatory hunger. There was something unnatural about their movements, as if they were aware of us, calculating their next move with a chilling intelligence. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to obey, paralyzed by fear. One of my friends, Jake, broke the silence that hung heavily in the air. "We need to get out of here," he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls of the cave. We turned to flee, but the cave twisted and turned, disorienting us as we struggled to find our way back. The spiders followed closely behind, their eyes glinting with a hunger that sent chills down my spine. I could feel their presence closing in, an overwhelming darkness that threatened to consume us whole. As we stumbled through the tunnels, our hearts racing and breaths quickening, we found ourselves in a large chamber. The walls were lined with webs, thick and shimmering like silver threads, glistening in the dim light of our flashlights. In the center of the chamber sat an old man, his eyes clouded but alive with a strange intensity that made me uneasy. He raised a gnarled hand, signaling us to approach. Against my better judgment, I stepped forward, curiosity overpowering my fear as I tried to make sense of this bizarre encounter. "Welcome, children," he rasped, his voice like gravel scraping against stone. "You've come to the heart of the abyss." He gestured to the spiders, who seemed to pause in their movements, their many legs stilling as they turned to regard us. "They are not here to kill you." "Not directly." Confusion washed over me, mingling with the fear that had settled in my gut. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling, barely above a whisper. The old man's expression darkened, and I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me. "They feed on fear, but more importantly, they consume what you cherish most, your fingers. They take a piece of you, and in return, they grant you a chance to escape. But be warned, the price is steep." A wave of nausea surged through me at his words. "What do you mean? Why would they take our fingers?" I asked, my mind racing with the implications. "They are remnants of an ancient pact," he explained, his voice dropping to a whisper as if sharing a dark secret. "Long ago, humans and spiders lived in harmony, sharing the earth and its resources. But greed and fear drove us apart, creating a rift that could not be healed. The spiders became vengeful, and now they seek to reclaim what was lost, what once belonged to them." My friends gathered around me, their faces pale with fear and disbelief. "We can't let them take anything from us," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling with anxiety. "We need to fight back." The old man shook his head slowly, his expression grave. "You cannot fight what you do not understand. The spiders are powerful, and their hunger is insatiable. Your only hope is to appease them, to give them what they desire." As he spoke, I felt a sharp pain in my hand. I looked down in horror to see a spider, its fangs sunk deep into my finger. Panic surged through me as I tried to pull away, but it held on with a vice-like grip, refusing to let go. I could feel my strength draining away, a sense of despair washing over me as the reality of our situation sank in. It was not just my blood it craved, it was my very essence, my life force. "Stop!" I yelled, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of my friends screaming in terror. I turned to see them being overwhelmed by the swarm, their fingers being bitten, the spiders feasting on their fear and despair. I felt a surge of anger and desperation rise within me. We had to escape, to fight back against this waking nightmare that threatened to consume us. I remembered the old man's words. Appease them. In a moment of clarity, I realized what I had to do. "We need to give them something," I said, my voice steadying despite the chaos around us. "Something they want, something to satisfy their hunger." "What? What do we have?" Jake shouted, his eyes wild with panic and fear as he looked around, searching for a way out. "Our fingers," I replied, my heart racing as I grasped the gravity of the situation. If we give them what they want, maybe they'll let us go, at least for now. With trembling hands, I raised my injured finger, the blood glistening in the dim light as I prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. I'll go first, I said, steeling myself for the pain that was to come. We have to show them we're not afraid, that we're willing to do what it takes to survive. As I pressed my finger against the nearest spider, it hesitated, its many eyes watching me intently, almost curiously. I could feel the others gathering around, their own fingers raised in surrender, ready to follow my lead. One by one, we offered our fingers, the pain sharp but fleeting, a small price to pay for our lives. The spiders began to retreat, their hunger momentarily sated as they consumed our offerings. The old man watched us with a mixture of approval and sorrow, his eyes reflecting the weight of our choices. You have chosen wisely, he said, his voice softening as if acknowledging our bravery. But remember, this is only a temporary reprieve. The spiders will return, and their hunger will grow. With our fingers offered, the cave began to tremble once more, the walls shifting as the darkness receded and a path opened before us. We stumbled forward, our hearts pounding in our chests, desperate to escape the abyss that had nearly claimed us. As we reached the entrance, the sunlight flooded our senses, blinding us momentarily as we emerged into the world outside. We gasped for air, our bodies trembling as we stepped into the daylight. The forest was alive with sound, the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of the cave. We turned to look back, the entrance now just a shadow in the distance, but we knew the truth. The spiders were still there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for the moment when they would reclaim what was theirs. In the days that followed, we tried to return to normalcy, to shake off the haunting memories of our experience, but the shadows of that cave clung to us like a second skin. Each time I looked at my hand, the memory of the pain and the darkness flooded back, a visceral reminder of what we had endured. We had escaped, but at what cost? Our fingers, now marked by the encounter, were a constant reminder of the pact we had made, a bond forged in fear and desperation. As time passed, I began to understand the old man's words more profoundly. The spiders were not just monsters lurking in the dark, they were a reflection of our own fears and desires, manifestations of the darkness that resides within us all. We had given them a piece of ourselves, a sacrifice in exchange for our lives, and in return, they had granted us a chance to escape. But the balance was fragile, and I knew that one day, they would return, hungrier than before, seeking to reclaim what we had taken from them. The forest still called to me, but I no longer felt the thrill of adventure that once beckoned me forward. Instead, I felt a deep sense of unease, a reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface, just waiting for the right moment to strike. I had learned that nature was not just a backdrop for our lives, it was a living entity, one that demanded respect, understanding, and caution. As I stood at the edge of the forest, contemplating the shadows that danced just beyond the trees, I felt the weight of the past pressing down on me. I had escaped the abyss, but the shadows still lingered, a constant reminder of the delicate balance between humanity and nature. And as I turned to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that the spiders were watching, waiting for the day when their hunger would return, ready to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The memory of our encounter would haunt me, a chilling reminder of our fragile existence in a world where darkness and light are forever intertwined. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I remember those warm summer days vividly, when everything felt vibrant and alive, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting golden rays over the shimmering waters of Black Cove. It was a place filled with laughter and freedom, where my friends Cooper, Henry, and I would escape from the mundane realities of life. We had spent countless weekends camping there, sharing stories around a crackling fire, and swimming in the cool, inviting sea. Those days were a sanctuary for us, a refuge from the pressures of school and work. But everything changed one fateful day, forever altering our lives. It was a Saturday, the kind of day that beckons you to the beach, urging you to bask in the sun and feel the sand between your toes. The air was thick with the scent of salt and pine as we set up our campsite, the sound of waves crashing against the rocks providing a soothing backdrop. Cooper, always the adventurous one, suggested we take a swim. "Come on!" "The water's perfect," he urged, his eyes sparkling with excitement and mischief. Reluctantly, Henry and I followed him into the water, feeling the refreshing embrace of the ocean wash over us. The ocean was a delightful escape from the heat, and we splashed around, laughing and joking, the joy of friendship enveloping us. But as the minutes passed, I began to notice something unsettling. The waves started to grow stronger, pulling at us with a force that felt almost alive, as if the ocean had a will of its own. I glanced at Cooper, who was swimming farther out, his silhouette slowly fading against the horizon, becoming just a dark shape amidst the rolling waves. "Cooper! Come back!" I shouted, my voice barely rising above the roar of the waves. He turned, flashing a grin that sent a shiver down my spine. It was as if he was daring the ocean to challenge him, taunting the very depths that could consume him. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A massive wave crashed over him, and when it receded, Cooper was gone. Panic surged through me as I screamed his name, my heart racing in my chest. Henry and I swam frantically, searching the churning water, but it was as if the sea had swallowed him whole, leaving no trace behind. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt the world around me begin to spin. Hours passed, though it felt like an eternity. We alerted the authorities, and a search party combed the area tirelessly, but Cooper was nowhere to be found. His family arrived, their faces etched with despair and disbelief, and as the sun set on that dreadful day, they accepted the grim reality. Cooper was lost to the sea, perhaps forever. The following weeks were a blur of grief and guilt. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed him somehow, that I should have done more to save him. Henry and I attended Cooper's memorial, surrounded by friends and family who shared their memories of him, each story a reminder of the vibrant spirit we had lost. I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of my own life, burdened by the weight of what had happened, unable to move forward. Time passed, but the shadows of that day lingered like a dark cloud over us. Henry and I often found ourselves reminiscing about Cooper, our conversations tinged with regret and sorrow. One evening, as we sat in my living room, the silence heavy between us, an idea struck me. What if we go back to Black Cove? I suggested, my voice trembling at the thought. Maybe we can find some closure, some way to honor his memory. Henry hesitated, his brow furrowing as he considered the suggestion, but I could see the flicker of determination in his eyes. We owe it to him, he finally agreed. So, we made plans to return to the cove, hoping to confront our demons and perhaps find some semblance of peace amid the turmoil. When we arrived, the air was thick with memories, each breath filled with the echoes of laughter and joy that once filled the space. The campsite looked almost untouched, as if time had stood still, preserving the innocence of our past. The waves still crashed against the shore, but now they felt ominous, a haunting reminder of that terrible day when everything changed. As we set up our tent, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, as if the very spirits of the cove were aware of our presence, silently judging our return. That night, we sat around the fire, sharing stories of Cooper, laughing through the tears that threatened to spill over. But as the flames flickered and danced, an unsettling chill crept into the air, wrapping around us like a cold embrace. I glanced toward the ocean, the moonlight casting eerie shadows on the water, transforming the familiar landscape into something sinister. What if we could somehow communicate with him? I mused, half jokingly. Maybe he's still out there, trying to reach us. Henry chuckled nervously, but I could see the unease in his eyes. You really think so? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I shrugged, but deep down, I felt a strange pull toward the water, as if it held secrets waiting to be uncovered, truths that could only be revealed through the depths of the ocean. The next day, we decided to explore the area around the cove, hoping to distract ourselves from the heaviness in our hearts. As we wandered along the rocky shore, we stumbled upon a path that led to a hidden cove, one we had never noticed before. Curiosity piqued, we followed it, our hearts racing with anticipation and a sense of adventure. As we ventured deeper, we discovered an old, weathered lighthouse standing sentinel over the cliffs, its presence both imposing and captivating. Its paint was peeling, and the glass in the lantern room was fogged with age, but there was something undeniably alluring about it, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Let's check it out, I suggested, feeling an inexplicable urge to explore, to uncover the stories hidden within its walls. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of salt, remnants of years gone by. The spiral staircase creaked under our weight as we ascended, each step echoing in the silence that surrounded us. At the top, we found ourselves in the lantern room, the view breathtaking and expansive. The ocean stretched endlessly before us, a vast expanse of blue, but something felt off. A sense of foreboding hung in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone in this place. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the small lantern we had brought with us. Panic surged as darkness enveloped us, swallowing the light. Henry? I called out, my voice trembling with fear. Are you there? I'm here, he replied, his tone equally frightened, the tension palpable. What just happened? Before I could respond, I heard a faint whisper, barely audible over the sound of the crashing waves outside. Help me! The voice was hauntingly familiar, and my heart raced as I realized it sounded like Cooper, a chilling echo of the past. Cooper? I shouted, my voice echoing in the darkness, filled with desperation. Is that you? The whisper grew louder, more insistent, as if urging us to respond. Help me! Find me! Without thinking, I bolted down the stairs, Henry close behind me, our hearts pounding in unison. We rushed outside, the salty air filling our lungs as we searched the shoreline, scanning the horizon for any sign of our friend. Where are you, Cooper? I yelled, desperation clawing at my throat, threatening to choke me. Then, as if summoned by my call, a figure emerged from the shadows of the cove. It was Cooper, or at least, it looked like him. His clothes were tattered, and his skin was pale and clammy, as if he had just risen from the depths of the ocean. But his eyes held a familiar spark, a glimmer of hope. Help me, he pleaded, extending a hand toward us, desperation etched on his face. Cooper! I cried, rushing forward, my heart soaring with hope. But as I reached for him, he faded into the mist, leaving only a chilling echo of his voice behind. Help me! I stumbled back, breathless and disoriented, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on me. What just happened? Henry gasped, his face pale with shock, disbelief etched in his features. Was that really him? I don't know, I replied, my heart racing, uncertainty flooding my mind. But we have to find him. We can't leave him here. We scoured the cove, calling out for Cooper, but there was no response, only the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the water, and a sense of dread settled over us, heavy and suffocating. Maybe we should go back to the lighthouse, I suggested, my voice trembling as fear gripped my heart. As we returned to the lighthouse, the air felt charged with energy, crackling with an intensity one couldn't explain. We climbed back to the lantern room, hoping to find answers to the questions swirling in our minds. The whispering wind seemed to carry Cooper's voice, guiding us, beckoning us to listen. "Help me! Find me!" Suddenly, the lantern flickered back to life, illuminating the room in a warm glow. In the light, we noticed a dusty journal lying on the floor, its pages yellowed with age and filled with the stories of the past. I picked it up, flipping through the entries, and discovered it belonged to the lighthouse keeper, detailing strange occurrences and sightings of lost souls in the cove. One entry caught my eye. The sea holds many secrets, and those who seek them may find themselves lost forever. Beware the call of the water. It is a siren song that lures the unwary into its depths. My heart sank as I realized the truth. Cooper hadn't just disappeared. He had been taken by the very essence of the cove, ensnared by its dark allure. The whispers were a warning, a plea for help from those who had succumbed to its sinister pull, trapped in a cycle of despair. "We have to save him," I said, determination flooding my veins, igniting a fire within me. "We can't let him be trapped here forever." Henry nodded, fear etched on his face, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "But how? We don't even know where he is, or how to reach him." "We'll have to confront the water," I replied, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "We have to go back into the ocean, back to where it all began." As we made our way to the water's edge, the waves crashed violently against the rocks, as if warning us to turn back, to abandon our quest. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. "Cooper!" I shouted, my voice ringing out over the tumultuous sea, filled with a mix of determination and dread. "We're coming for you." With that, we plunged into the icy water, the shock of the cold hitting me like a jolt of electricity. The waves surged around us, pulling us deeper into the cove, dragging us into the very depths of our fears. I fought against the current, calling out for Cooper, hoping he could hear me, hoping he was still there. As we swam, the darkness enveloped us, the water pressing down like a heavy weight, suffocating and disorienting. I felt a presence beside me, and for a moment, I thought it was Henry. But when I turned, I was met with a ghostly figure, its eyes hollow and its mouth moving in silent screams, a visage of despair. "Help me!" it wailed, reaching for me with skeletal fingers, its voice a chilling reminder of the lost souls that roamed these waters. I recoiled in horror, realizing it was one of the lost souls, trapped in the depths of the cove, seeking to drag others into its torment. "Keep swimming!" I shouted to Henry, my heart racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We had to reach Cooper before it was too late, before the darkness consumed us as well. Suddenly, I spotted a flicker of light beneath the surface. "There!" I cried, diving deeper, my heart pounding with hope. The light grew brighter, illuminating a figure tangled in seaweed, Cooper. I reached out, grasping his hand, and pulled him free from the watery grave. His eyes flooded open, filled with confusion and fear, as he looked at us through the haze of the water. "Jack?" "Henry," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the roar of the waves, a whisper of the boy we once knew. "We're here. We're getting you out." I shouted, relief flooding my heart, but as I turned to swim back to the surface, the water around us began to churn violently. The lost souls surged forward, their hands grasping at us, trying to drag us down into the abyss, to claim us as their own. "Fight them!" I yelled, my heart pounding in my chest, desperation fueling my movements. "We can't let them take us!" With every ounce of strength, we swam upward, pushing against the tide, the darkness swirling around us. The souls wailed, their cries echoing in my ears, a cacophony of despair, but I focused on the surface, on the light breaking through the water. We were so close to freedom. Just as I thought we would make it, a cold hand grasped my ankle, pulling me down into the depths. I screamed, desperation flooding my veins, panic clawing at my throat. "Help! Henry! Cooper!" But just as I felt myself being dragged under, I felt a strong grip on my arm. It was Henry, pulling me back to the surface, fighting against the tide. "Don't let go," he shouted, determination etched on his face, a fierce resolve that ignited a spark of hope in me. With one final push, we broke through the surface, gasping for air, the moonlight bathing us in silver, illuminating the chaos around us. I could see Cooper floating beside us, his eyes wide with shock, disbelief etched in his features. "We did it!" I gasped, relief flooding through me, but as I looked around, I realized the souls were still reaching for us, their cries echoing in the night, a haunting reminder of the darkness we had just escaped. "We have to get to the shore." Together, we swam with all our might, the waves crashing around us, each stroke a battle against the forces that sought to claim us. Finally, we reached the beach, collapsing on the sand, gasping for breath, the weight of our ordeal crashing down around us. The souls wailed in frustration, their cries fading into the distance as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. We lay there, exhausted and trembling, the weight of what we had just experienced settling over us like a heavy blanket. Cooper looked at us, confusion and gratitude mingling in his eyes. The boy we had lost now returned. "What happened?" "I thought I was lost forever," he whispered, the reality of his return slowly dawning on him. "You were," I replied, my voice shaking, the truth heavy on my heart. "But we found you. We fought for you." As the sun rose over Black Cove, casting a warm glow over the water, I knew we had faced something unimaginable, something that would forever change us. The cove held its secrets, dark and deep, but we had survived, and in that survival, we had reclaimed a piece of Cooper's spirit, a flicker of hope amidst the despair. But even as we walked away from the beach, the warmth of the sun on our backs, I couldn't shake the feeling that the cove would always be a part of us, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. And somewhere deep down, I knew that the call of the water would always beckon, a siren song that would never truly fade away, forever echoing in the depths of our memories. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. In the oppressive heat of the summer of 1982, I found myself in the small, unassuming town of Walden, Texas. The sun blazed relentlessly overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally, while the air hung thick with an unsettling stillness that wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. I had come here with a group of friends, a motley crew eager to escape the mundane routine of our everyday lives. We were drawn to the town's haunted past, captivated by tales of strange occurrences that had sent its residents fleeing in terror. Little did I know that our innocent curiosity would lead us down a dark and twisted path of despair and fear that would haunt us forever. The first sign that something was amiss came unexpectedly when we stumbled upon an old, abandoned church on the outskirts of town. Its weathered wooden doors creaked ominously as we pushed them open, revealing a dusty interior filled with shattered pews and peeling paint that seemed to tell stories of long-forgotten prayers. The air was heavy with the scent of decay and mildew, and a chill ran down my spine as I stepped inside. As we explored the church, my friends joked about the ghost stories we had heard, their laughter echoing off the walls, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched by unseen eyes lurking in the shadows. That night, we decided to camp out in the church, thinking it would add to the thrill of our adventure and make for a memorable experience. We set up our sleeping bags on the cold, hard floor, surrounded by the remnants of a forgotten congregation. As darkness enveloped us, the flickering light of our campfire cast eerie, dancing shadows on the walls, and I felt a growing sense of unease settle in my stomach. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but deep down, I knew there was something more sinister at play. As the hours passed, strange noises began to fill the air, whispers that seemed to echo from the corners of the church, unintelligible yet haunting, weaving through the silence like an unsettling melody. My friends laughed nervously, attributing the sounds to the wind outside, but I knew better. There was something darker lurking in the shadows, something that had not forgotten the pain it had witnessed in this forsaken place. The next day, driven by our insatiable curiosity, we ventured deeper into the town, our exploration leading us to the local library. There, we uncovered the chilling history of Walden, a narrative steeped in tragedy and mystery. In the early 1980s, a series of mysterious events had unfolded, events that had left the town in shambles and its residents in fear. 5 students had vanished without a trace, their bodies later discovered in the woods, hidden beneath the underbrush. 4 of them were found crucified, their lifeless forms arranged in a grotesque display that sent shivers down my spine, while the 5th bore the chilling inscription "Daddy Longlegs" carved into his chest, a grotesque reminder of the horrors that had transpired. The police had ruled it a mass suicide, but the townsfolk whispered of a dark figure that had been seen lurking in the shadows, a tall man dressed in black, his presence accompanied by an aura of dread that seemed to suffocate the very air around him. They claimed he was a preacher, a harbinger of violence who had driven the students to their tragic end. The more we learned about the town's dark history, the more I felt an inexplicable connection to the events that had transpired, as if the shadows of the past were reaching out to ensnare me. That night, as we returned to the church, the atmosphere felt heavier than before, thick with an oppressive energy that made my skin crawl. The whispers grew louder, echoing in my mind like a sinister lullaby, wrapping around me like a shroud. I could see the flickering shadows dancing along the walls, and I felt an overwhelming urge to leave this place of nightmares, but my friends were determined to stay. They laughed and joked, trying to lighten the mood, but I could sense the tension building, a palpable fear that hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. As the clock struck midnight, we heard a loud bang from outside, followed by a low, guttural growl that sent panic surging through me. I urged my friends to leave, to run, but they were frozen in place, their faces pale with fear, eyes wide with terror. It was then that I saw him, a figure standing at the edge of the woods, tall and imposing, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light that pierced through the darkness. He raised his arms, and I felt an icy grip clutch my heart, paralyzing me with dread. In that moment, I knew we were not alone. The whispers grew into a cacophony of voices, each one pleading for release, for justice, a chorus of anguish that filled the air. My friends finally broke free from their stupor and ran, but I was rooted to the spot, unable to look away from the figure that seemed to draw me in. It felt as if time had stopped, and I was trapped in a nightmare from which I could not awaken, a prisoner of my own fear. Suddenly, the figure lunged forward, and I stumbled back, my heart racing wildly in my chest. I turned to flee, but the church doors slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping us inside. My friends banged on the doors, screaming for help, but their cries were drowned out by the oppressive silence that enveloped us. I felt the presence of the tall man closing in on me, his looming figure casting a long shadow that seemed to stretch across the room. I could hear his voice now, a low, rumbling tone that sent shivers down my spine. "You should not have come here," he whispered, his breath cold against my skin, sending chills racing through my body. In a desperate bid for escape, I grabbed a nearby candlestick and swung it at the shadows, but it passed through them as if they were smoke, leaving me feeling helpless and vulnerable. The whispers intensified, drowning out my thoughts, and I felt myself being pulled toward the figure, drawn in by an unseen force. I fought against the invisible grip, but it was too strong, too overwhelming. I could see my friends' terrified faces as they desperately tried to open the doors, but it was as if they were sealed by an unseen power, a barrier that held us captive. Just when I thought I would be consumed by the darkness, the figure paused, his eyes narrowing as he regarded me with an intensity that sent a jolt of fear through my veins. "You carry the mark," he said, his voice a haunting melody that echoed in my mind, reverberating through the very core of my being. You are one of them. The words struck me like a physical blow, and I felt a surge of memories flood my mind, visions of the past, of the students, of the violence that had unfolded in this cursed place, each memory a shard of glass cutting into my soul. Suddenly, I was transported back to that fateful day in 1982. I saw the students, their faces twisted in fear and desperation as they were led into the woods by the tall man, their fates sealed by a darkness they could not comprehend. I witnessed the horror of their final moments, the betrayal that had driven them to their doom, and I felt their pain, their anguish, and their desperate cries for help echoing in my ears. It was overwhelming, a tidal wave of emotion that crashed over me, and I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face as I became a vessel for their suffering. As the visions faded, I found myself back in the church, the figure looming over me like a dark cloud. You cannot escape your past, he said, his voice dripping with malice, each word a reminder of the chains that bound me. You are bound to this place. With those words, he vanished into the shadows, leaving me alone in the suffocating darkness, the weight of his words pressing down on me like a leaden shroud. My friends finally managed to break free from the doors, and we stumbled into the night, gasping for air as if we had just emerged from the depths of a nightmare. We ran without looking back, not stopping until we reached the safety of our car, our hearts racing in our chests. As we drove away from Walden, I could still hear the whispers in my mind, echoing the words of the tall man, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lingered. I thought I had escaped, but deep down, I knew the truth. The darkness had marked me, and it would never let me go, a shadow that would follow me wherever I went. Years passed, and I tried to forget the horrors of that summer, to bury the memories deep within me like a hidden wound. I moved on with my life, but the whispers never truly faded. They haunted my dreams, creeping into my thoughts during the quiet moments of the day, a constant reminder of the darkness I had faced. The weight of the past lingered like a shadow, always just out of sight, a specter that refused to be exorcised. Then, one fateful day, I received an email that shattered my fragile peace, sending a jolt of fear through my veins. The subject line read "Daddy Longlegs," and my heart raced as I opened it, dread pooling in my stomach. The message was simply yet chilling. You should have stayed away. The shadows are waiting for you. My hands trembled as I read the words, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. It was a reminder that I could never truly escape the darkness of Walden, a truth I had tried so hard to deny. I tried to dismiss it as a prank, a cruel joke from someone who knew my past, but the following days brought more messages, each one more sinister than the last, each one a chilling reminder of what I had tried to forget. They spoke of the tall man, of the students, and of the violence that had consumed the town. I felt the grip of fear tightening around me, squeezing the breath from my lungs, and I knew I had to confront the past that I had tried so hard to bury. With a heavy heart, I returned to Walden, the memories flooding back like a tidal wave as I drove through the desolate streets. The town was a ghost of its former self, the once vibrant community now reduced to crumbling buildings and overgrown weeds, a haunting reminder of the lives that had been lost. I parked outside the old church, my heart pounding in my chest, the air thick with an oppressive silence that seemed to swallow me whole. I could feel the whispers beckoning me from within, calling me back to the darkness. As I stepped inside, the darkness enveloped me once more, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. The shadows danced along the walls, and I could hear the faint echoes of laughter and cries, the remnants of the past that refused to be silenced. I called out, my voice trembling with fear and uncertainty, "Is anyone here?" But only silence answered, a chilling reminder of the emptiness that had consumed this place. It was then that I saw him, the tall figure standing at the altar, his eyes glowing like embers in the night, a beacon of dread that sent a surge of terror through me. I felt a surge of fear, but I stood my ground, determined to face the darkness that had haunted me for so long. What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through my veins, a flicker of defiance igniting within me. "You cannot run from your fate," he replied, his voice a haunting melody that sent chills down my spine, wrapping around me like a vice. "You are part of this story, and it is far from over." With those words, he raised his hand, and the whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts, a chaotic symphony of despair that threatened to consume me. In that moment, I understood the truth. I was not merely a witness to the horrors of Walden. I was a part of them, intertwined with the darkness that had seeped into my very soul. I could feel the weight of the students' pain, their cries for justice echoing in my mind, and I knew I had to confront the past that had bound me to this place, to break the cycle of violence that had plagued the town for so long. With a newfound resolve, I stepped forward, determined to reclaim my power and break free from the chains that bound me. "I will not let you control me," I declared, my voice rising above the whispers, a battle cry against the darkness. "I will set you free." The figure paused, his expression shifting as if he were taken aback by my defiance, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. The shadows flickered, and for a brief moment, I saw the faces of the students, lost souls trapped in a never-ending nightmare, their eyes filled with sorrow and pain. I reached out to them, feeling their anguish and despair, and I vowed to honor their memory, to give them the justice they had been denied. As I spoke their names, the whispers began to fade, replaced by a sense of peace that washed over me like a cleansing tide. The tall figure watched, his eyes narrowing in disbelief, the darkness around him beginning to wane. "You cannot change the past," he warned, his voice tinged with a hint of desperation, but I could feel the power of my words resonating through the church, a force of light pushing back the shadows. "I can change what it means to me," I replied, my heart swelling with determination, the fire of resolve igniting within me. "I will not let fear dictate my life any longer." With that, the darkness began to recede, the shadows retreating into the corners of the church, their grip on me loosening as I stood firm in my newfound strength. The tall figure's form flickered, and I could see the anguish etched on his face, a reflection of the pain he had caused. "You are stronger than I anticipated," he admitted, his voice tinged with a hint of respect, a grudging acknowledgement of my power. As the last of the shadows faded, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a burden I had carried for far too long. The whispers had quieted, replaced by a serene silence that enveloped the church, a blanket of peace that washed over me. I had broken the cycle, and the souls of the students were finally free, released from the torment that had bound them for so long. I turned to leave, a sense of closure washing over me like a gentle tide. As I stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the town, illuminating the path ahead. I knew I would carry the memories of Walden with me, but they would no longer haunt me. Instead, they would serve as a reminder of the strength I had found in the face of darkness, a testament to the power of resilience. As I drove away from Walden, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw the tall figure standing at the edge of the woods, watching me depart, a silent guardian of the past. But this time, I felt no fear, only a sense of peace and closure. The shadows may whisper, but I had learned to face them, and in that knowledge, I found my freedom. I had confronted the darkness, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my life, no longer a prisoner of fear, but a survivor, ready to embrace the light. In this seemingly ordinary little town, a lot of regular folks go about their lives. I thought my life would stay the same until Bill walked into my world. We were neighbors, his house right next to mine. Bill was a middle-aged guy, shy and giving off a gentle vibe. But there was something unsettling in his eyes that piqued my curiosity. After a few casual chats, I learned he had just moved to town, but not long after settling in, strange things started happening in his home. At first, he only heard faint knocking and scratching sounds coming from the walls. Bill figured it might be some rodents causing the ruckus, so he set up traps to catch them. However, even after spending several nights patiently waiting in that dark attic, the noises didn't lessen. In fact, they grew louder. Every night, as darkness fell, the sounds, accompanied by unusual whispers, became unbearable, filling him with dread. "I really need your help," he said, his voice trembling. His plea unsettled me, but out of concern for my neighbor, I decided to stay up with him all night, trying to unravel this mystery. That night, we lit candles in Bill's house, the flickering light dancing in every corner, bringing a bit of warmth, but I knew we were both on edge. Time ticked by slowly, the air growing heavier, as if even the breeze had stopped in its tracks. We moved cautiously down the hallway, trying to trace the source of those sounds. Just as we approached the attic entrance, the noises suddenly stopped, replaced by a chilling silence. We exchanged nervous glances, tension sparkling in our eyes. I suggested we investigate further, and eventually, we found ourselves in front of a creaky door. Bill hesitated for a moment, but then nodded resolutely. As soon as we opened the door, a musty smell rushed out, the air thick with an eerie scent. We stepped carefully into the attic, which was covered in dust, devoid of any modern touches. Suddenly, a soft whimpering sound came from behind the walls, as if echoing the pain of the past. A shiver ran down my spine, making me question whether this was all just our imagination. But when I bent down to check the floor, I stumbled upon some broken toys and a few yellowed photographs. The pictures showed a smiling family, but I could sense that time had left deep wrinkles on those memories. I handed the photos to Bill, whose face gradually drained of color. As time passed, our curiosity was overshadowed by fear. At that moment, a heavy thud came from the corner of the room. We spun around in terror to see a door slowly creaking open, revealing a dark abyss. In the silence, it felt like some force was calling us. I felt a strong pull, as if an invisible hand was drawing me toward that darkness. Bill gripped my hand tightly. Though his teeth were clenched, I could feel his inner fear. We pushed open that door, and the deep darkness seemed endless, with faint whispers echoing around us. "What are you doing here?" a ghostly voice whispered in our ears, making us jump. The sound seemed to come from the depths of history, revealing the hidden past of this house. We had to face the terrifying truth: this place was steeped in countless tragedies. As we delved deeper, we felt history stirring, like countless souls softly mourning. The stories of Bill's house began to surface, and the lost spirits lingered in this space, carrying unresolved grudges. Gradually, Bill started recalling some rumors about the house. Strange stories circulated in town. Legend had it that this was the home of a tragic family, where a bizarre incident had occurred a few years back, and their child mysteriously vanished during a stormy night. Since then, many claimed to have seen apparitions here and heard faint cries. As Bill's memories became clearer, the atmosphere around us grew increasingly sinister, as if something was lurking before us. We desperately wanted to escape, but it felt like there was no way out. The oppressive feeling made it hard to breathe, and we even began to doubt if we could leave this place safely. Then the door creaked again, as if inviting us deeper into the darkness. I tried to convince Bill to leave, but his gaze was fixed on those fading memories. A look of struggle crossed his face, as if he were battling his inner demons. Finally, under the pressure of whispering voices and the dampness seeping from the walls, we decided not to go any further. I pulled Bill back toward the attic exit with all my strength, silently praying for this to end. Like a nightmare, we finally stepped out of that door, but the soft calling still echoed behind us. Back at Bill's house, the night sky had quietly welcomed a full moon, casting a gentle glow through the windows. In that soft light, I saw the fear in his eyes gradually fade, but I knew this experience would forever mark him. Even though he would have to confront this terrifying truth, he ultimately chose to leave the house. A few days later, he packed his things, preparing to move elsewhere. When he said goodbye to me, his expression was complex, filled with both anticipation for a new life and deep reluctance for the past. I knew this house was not just a place for him, it was a haunting nightmare he couldn't shake off. As I stood at the door watching him leave, I realized this place still held secrets unknown to anyone. Perhaps the souls trapped within these walls were still calling out. I turned back to my own home, the night falling once more, the sounds returning, and I felt powerless, left with nothing but an endless gaze at that closed door. It was Christmas Eve, a night that usually buzzed with excitement and joy, filled with the laughter of family and the warmth of togetherness. Yet for me, it was merely another excuse to indulge in my selfish desires, a time to focus solely on what I could receive rather than what I could give. I remember standing outside my house, the cold air biting at my skin, as I squabbled with my cousin Benny. The transformed spirit of the season meant little to me amidst the stacks of presents piled high around me. I wore my arrogance like a crown, thinking of nothing but the gleaming toys I had my eyes set on, envisioning how they would bring me endless happiness. "You're just a spoiled brat," Benny hurled at me, his eyes flashing with defiance and frustration. "You don't care about anything but yourself. What if you lost everything? Would you still be so happy?" His words cut through the air like a knife, but I brushed them aside as if they were nothing more than the wind. I scoffed, rolling my eyes at him. The way he spoke, you'd think he was some sort of wise sage, preaching about the virtues of selflessness and kindness. I felt the heat of anger bubble within me, a surge of irritation that was impossible to ignore. In a moment of reckless impulse, I pushed him away, watching as his expression changed from defiance to shock. For a split second, I sheathed myself in a fleeting moment of pity, but that moment disappeared quickly, overtaken by the rush of my rage. I shoved him again, and his stumbling body collided painfully with the sharp edge of the fence. I didn't even want to look back. That sickening feeling of dread coiled within me, a tight knot in my stomach, and instead of concern for my cousin, I felt only frustration boiling over. "Stop pretending to be the good one. You're weak," I spat out, my voice dripping with disdain, angry at myself for letting his words penetrate the bubble of my selfishness. In the ensuing chaos, I rushed into the house, my heart pounding fiercely, not from fear for him, but from the adrenaline surging through me, fueled by my aggression. I could practically hear my father's heavy footsteps rushing toward us, his shadow looming like a storm cloud ready to break. The mixture of outrage and worry exploded as he entered the room, his eyes wild with fear and fury. The disappointment in his voice was like a physical blow, shaking me to my core. "What did you do?" he bellowed, his words echoing in the silence. And with those words, my world began to tilt dangerously. I felt the ground drop away beneath me, as if I were standing at the edge of a cliff, moments from tumbling into the abyss. My father's anger struck me with the force of an icy wave, and it began to drown me in guilt that I could hardly comprehend. But even through my panic, I couldn't grasp the depth of my mistakes, nor the consequences of my actions. He yelled my name, but I barely sensed the sound. It was as if I were underwater, and the muffled world above had no meaning to me. That night, I found myself momentarily eclipsed by sorrow for Benny, who lay injured under the weight of my selfishness. My own reflection in the hallway mirror told me I was anything but a child concerned for others. I was drowning in my ego, refusing to admit how far I had fallen from any semblance of decency or compassion. As the night wore on, it turned murky and disorienting, a haze of confusion and regret clouding my thoughts. When I finally snapped back to reality, I was no longer in my house, but aboard a sinister-looking train that seemed to stretch into the darkness. I looked around and saw the children, their faces mirroring my own confusion and fear. The general atmosphere felt heavy and restless, as if we were all trapped in a dream from which there was no awakening, a nightmare that had taken form. The conductor appeared, an unnerving figure dressed in dimly lit attire, his presence sending chills down my spine. His eyes danced with a malice that made my skin crawl and my heart race. "Tickets, please," he demanded, a smirk highlighting his face that seemed more like a challenge than a request. I was terrified, my heart pounding in my chest, but all I could think about was getting away, possibly back to my home where the warmth of Christmas lights still twinkled through the window, a stark contrast to the cold reality of this train. A girl with a cold, trembling voice broke the silence. "Where are we? What is happening?" Tears glistened in her eyes. She was afraid, and we all were, yet we stood frozen in place, waiting for some miracle to dispel our fears and return us to the safety of our homes. "Ah, little ones," the conductor sneered, bitterness lacing his every word. "You've boarded the midnight train of redemption. This ride refracts your past and exposes the weight of your selfishness." With that, a chill crept deeper into my bones as I realized we were going to confront our sins, our failures, and the darkness that lay hidden within us. With each screech of the train, flashes of my life paraded before me, scenes of me reveling in my toys, watching my father's disappointment as I relentlessly pursued more, never caring for the feelings of those around me. I saw Benny's face, full of pain from my actions, and I recoiled in horror, feeling my insides twist in knots as I recognized the hurt I had caused. We traveled further into the tempest of regret, the weight of guilt crashing down on my shoulders like a heavy burden. My knees trembled as the conductor revealed each tortured memory, each moment of selfishness laid bare before my eyes. "Are you enjoying this ride?" he hissed, his voice dripping with mockery. "Your journey leads only to darkness and uncertainty." The horror reached its peak when I noticed another child, a frail girl, isolated and trembling in the corner of the train car. Her vacant expression haunted me, but it was clear she was different from the rest of us. Unlike the other children, she wasn't here out of selfishness, but because she had already paid the price for her kindness by being constantly overlooked and ignored. It was as if I was peering into my own soul, seeing a projection of everything I was terrified of becoming, a reflection of my own potential for loneliness and despair. As the train rattled and plunged into deeper parts of shadow, I could hear the screeches of the conductor echoing in my ears, each laugh a reminder of my previous actions and choices. The reflection of darkness overwhelmed me, and I had once been so self-absorbed that I failed to see the beauty in others, the intricate tapestry of lives woven together that made the world brighter. Instead, I reveled in my isolation, wallowing in the mire of my desires, blind to the suffering I caused. In that moment of despair, something ignited within me. I couldn't let this girl share the same fate as me. Her kindness had been steadfast, and my actions had almost led to her demise. As the train hurtled through the depths of my darkness, I felt a compelling urge to protect her, to shield her from the horrors that haunted me, to ensure she didn't suffer as I had. When the conductor appeared once more, this time with a challenge, I felt the fire of resolve grow inside me, burning away my selfishness. "One can be redeemed if they sacrifice for another," he said, dark amusement simmering beneath his words, his gaze piercing into my very soul. With every ounce of courage I could muster, I stepped forward, determined to face the darkness and the consequences of my actions. "I'll protect her. I don't care what it costs," I declared, my voice steady despite the tremors of fear running through me, the weight of my decision pressing down like a heavy cloak. The conductor laughed, but in his eyes, I saw something shift, a flicker of respect that hadn't been there before. "Are you willing to suffer for another rather than yourself?" He extended his hand, beckoning me to step closer, and without hesitation, I reached out, ready to embrace whatever came next. As my fingers brushed against his, an electric shock coursed through me, shattering my self-centered shield and forcing me to confront the reality of my choices. The train lurched forward, and the world blurred around us, colors melding into a chaotic swirl. I felt the weight of desperation wash over the car as I moved closer to the girl, shielding her with my body, determined to protect her from the darkness that threatened to consume us both. In that instant of perceived sacrifice, I was overrun by emotions of selflessness, a powerful wave of clarity washing over me. I realized what it meant to truly care for another person, to transcend my own desires for a fleeting moment and invest in the joy of someone else's life, to give rather than take. The train began to dissipate, transforming the darkness into something lighter, vibrant colors cascading like ribbons of hope, illuminating the path ahead. I clutched the girl tightly, holding onto the shreds of courage that were stylistically pulling us from the abyss of remorse and regret, the darkness fading away as we emerged into the light. When I finally opened my eyes, I found myself back on the porch of my home, the holiday lights twinkling cheerfully in the distance, a warm glow that felt like a promise of renewal. The air felt fresh and clean, the bitter taste of regret fading with the horrific train ride. I turned to see Benny standing there, a questioning gaze plastered on his face. His eyes widened as he registered my presence, the worry mingling with a flicker of hope and relief. "I'm sorry, Benny," I whispered, my voice breaking with the weight of my experience. The burden of my past lingered like a shadow, transformed into insight and understanding. My heart clenched, but I knew it wasn't too late to make amends, to reach out and repair the damage I had caused. From that day forth, I tried to embrace kindness, seizing every opportunity to connect with others, to share rather than hoard, to uplift rather than tear down. I learned that the essence of humanity lies in our connections, and the true spirit of Christmas comes, not from receiving, but from giving, from the joy of seeing others smile. The midnight train may have started as a nightmarish reflection of my past, but it carved the path to my redemption, leading me to a new perspective on life. I shifted my focus away from myself, cherishing the laughter and love shared among friends and family, discovering that true happiness resides in the hearts we touch along the way. With every holiday season that followed, I committed to making each one brighter for those around me, spreading joy and warmth instead of selfishness and regret. My heart no longer felt heavy with sorrow, but sang with the joy of purpose, a melody of hope that would guide me through the years to come. Alright, that's the end of today's story. Thank you for joining me on this thrilling journey through the shadows of life and death. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the little bell to get more spine-chilling tales from Whisper of Horror. Remember, every soul has a story, and here, we give them a voice. See you next time. Stay curious, stay cautious, and keep whispering horror.